The English word dragon derives from the Greek dragon. Ancient Greece had numerous monsters that were classified as dragons. However, none of them were flying fire breathers, they were much closer to large serpents. At their very core, dragons in Greek mythology were large serpents with multiple layers of razor-sharp teeth and often multiple heads. These dragons were normally found in two different locations, the most common being in the water. Sacred springs would often be guarded by one of these serpents.
And then obviously the winged serpent. It's interesting that this image that is used today still by the modern medicine was probably one of the oldest symbols in the world and on Earth and human history, in the Sumerian entity Enki. And into the symbol we can read all kinds of things. We can read a double helix of the DNA, we can read vibrational frequency, a matter, we can read levitation, we can read calming the axis of mundi, we can read all kinds of interesting encoded messages in this. You cannot separate from human history. And also, if you start looking at ancient civilizations, the fact that the so-called winged serpent or the feathered serpent or the flying serpent is this common denominator in all these ancient cultures, including South Africa, Southern Africa, the Americas, and even in China and the East.
I remember when I was over in England, I'd be walking around in these churches, and I'm like walking on all the graves. I'm like, I just don't feel right about this. But Bishop Bell died there, and he's got a brassing that goes along the outside that kind of outlines where his grave is right there. And they have a rug over it now, but when you're there, if you pull that back, you can see on this brassing, there's all sorts of little animals, and you're like, oh, I know that one. Yep, I know that one. I know. That one looks like a dinosaur. That one looks like a dinosaur. So you see these dinosaur dragon-looking creatures right there. And, that's just one of many examples. And that's in the 1500s.
Yeah, there's several examples in both of these books, so make sure you guys check it out. But just as a flavor here, there was a petroglyph by the Anasazi natives, looks strikingly like a sauropod dinosaur, in other words, a dragon. There's a pictograph made by Native Americans in Utah of a flying dragon, kind of looks like a pterosaur. There's even a wall-mounted scripture, I think this one's amazing, in Cambodia of a dragon that looks like a stegosaurus.
Looks like a stegosaur, yeah, kind of muzzled even.
Amazing, yeah, just the picture right there. Plus, there's paintings in Australia by the Aborigines of a water dragon, kind of looks like a plesiosaur, and on it goes. Plus, there's even flags, there's banners. Just look at the Welsh flag today, look at the Imperial China flag today. There's dragons on these flags. So obviously, people for a long time believed that these were real creatures.
Right.
Are these depictions like ancient accounts told by generation after generation, like passed down?
I think so. I think it's interesting to think, oh, well, the science supports that if there were flying lizards, their bones wouldn't have fossilized, and these have been passed down, stories that have been exaggerated and passed down from generation to generation.
And some of them breathe fire, but some of them don't, depending upon
which culture it was significant to.
Here is a beautiful example of a Greek coin with a serpent and inside or around some sort of a structure behind it. And here we have carved in a rock the similar kind of serpent, similar kind of shape and form of that serpent inside a pentagon, which I find fascinating. And I think that particular carving tells 1,000 words that we can spend a lot of time on just analyzing what that really means.
Have you heard about the crazy dragon sighting in Bologna back in 1572 when Pope Gregory XIII became the new head honcho of the Catholic Church? Yeah, apparently this big scary dragon just popped up out of nowhere in the countryside and people were freaking out. But get this, the Pope had a secret weapon up his sleeve. He brought along his cousin, who was an expert on dragons. Who knew that was even a thing? His name was Ulysses Aldrovandi, and he had been obsessed with dragons his whole life. He even had a collection of dragon remains, including one that was only slightly bigger than a human hand. Crazy, right? Anyway, this little dragon is still on display today at the Biblioteca Universitaria di Bologna. I don't know about you, but I definitely want to check that out the next time I'm in Italy. But you know what's even more interesting? Medieval manuscripts actually depict dragons being used for practical purposes, like as guard animals, or even in combat with wild animals. Can you imagine having a pet dragon to protect your castle, or fight off dangerous animals? It's like something straight out of Game of Thrones. I wonder what other secrets history has been hiding from us.
Chinese, Japanese, and ancient Greek myths describe dragons as ferocious aquatic monsters. However, the largest underwater animals known to science are mammals. Whales, walruses, seals, and dolphins are born with the necessary set of biological attributes to be able to live in or near water. Dragons, in turn, are definitely not mammals, and judging by the folk tales and archaeological findings, they're much closer to dinosaurs. Plus, among different types of prehistoric lizards, there were also marine beasts. For example, Plesiosaurus. Its wide barrel-shaped torso and smooth skin with no scales helped it easily maneuver through the ocean. Very long neck and a small head let the animal quietly approach fish, which see a threat only in big-sized objects. Thanks to its short tail and 4 flippers, this predator could almost fly underwater. When the Plesiosaurus fell off the radar, its place was taken by Mosasaurus. This carnivorous reptile also had a streamlined body but a larger head, short neck, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Now, this looks more dragonish. Mosasaurus didn't use its flippers while swimming. Instead, it moved in the water by beating its tail back and forth and curving its spine from side to side. Predators of this kind don't sneak behind their prey, but rather chase it and then attack. Therefore, water dragons don't contradict the laws of biology. But what about their winged relatives? Dragons described in various legends may seem too bulky to be able to fly, and yet there are documented examples of quite large animals that could take off to the sky. The biggest of them are called pterosaurs, whose wingspan reached 10 meters. The secret lies in the ratio of the creature's weight to the size of its wings. Pterosaurs could weigh up to 250 kilograms. Their bones were partly hollow and just a few millimeters thick. Apart from that, they were strengthened by internal struts, just like an airplane's wings. Since the bones were air-filled, they were flexible and lightweight. As for dragons, their wings could be filled with, for instance, methane. This gas is lighter than air. That's why it would make even a creature more massive than a pterosaur capable of flying. If the structure of dragon bones was indeed comparable to that of large birds, this could be the main reason why we can't find their fossilized skeletons. The point is, porous bones decay before they fossilize. That may be why we still have no direct evidence of their existence. But what about dragons' trademark ability to spit fire? Could this be a real biological feature? You'd be surprised, but not only can such animals theoretically exist, but they already do, side by side with us. Bombardier beetles can release bursts of hot liquid from their pygidial glands, located in the abdomen. The chemical compounds are stored in 2 reservoirs and a separate chamber where they're mixed. Dragon biology could work in a similar manner. It takes just one specific chemical reaction to start breathing fire. And it's not even the only way to get it done. Many animals, including humans, produce methane through anaerobic digestion. This gas is highly flammable, so instead of wasting it on useless burping, dragons could accumulate methane in internal reservoirs and, if necessary, unleash this potential with a more exciting purpose. But even though methane is so flammable, it needs to be ignited, doesn't it? But how? I doubt dragons were carrying around Zippos. But in fact, they could probably have something like lighters inside. Small silica and steel deposits on teeth would be enough to spark a fire. The lizard would need to snap its jaws one single time to release streams of blazing flames. But would this hurt the dragon itself? Saharan silver ants have a special tool for such cases, reflective bristles that cover their bodies like a metal suit. Thanks to this armor, ants can easily survive in an environment where temperatures rise to 70 degrees Celsius. And since fire-breathing dragons don't need to withstand heat from the flames all the time, this level of protection should be sufficient. This means that dragon anatomy doesn't conflict with the laws of biology either. Although there's one catch. As a matter of fact, evolution always strives for simplicity. What's the point of creating such complex mechanisms and stuffing them all into one creature? None of them is an absolute must for survival, and their reliability is doubtful. Sharp claws and powerful jaws are more than enough for a successful hunt. As for self-defense, using long, strong tails as a weapon would do the trick. If born with a pair of wings, an animal may just spread them and fly away. That's why if dragons really existed, they would have died out very quickly and been replaced by more rational species. But anyway, let's imagine these legendary beasts were indeed real beings that survived all ice ages and mass extinctions and even avoided human violence. Would they be able to fit into our world? Since dragon myths can be found in all cultures, we can assume they lived all around the planet. They could probably have inhabited Earth at the same time as dinosaurs when all the continents were a single landmass. As time went by, lithospheric plates moved. That could separate descendants of the same species so they could wind up in absolutely different conditions. As a result, flying, aquatic, and terrestrial dragon species could have appeared. Most probably, these animals would have naturally evolved as well as the rest of the vertebrates, so it's idle to hope that someday you'll meet a dragon looking like those CGI things. Feathered dragons would have lost their ability to fly just like present-day large birds. Even though they would have still had porous bones, in the course of evolution, wings would have gradually become smaller until there were no wings at all. Unable to fly anymore, dragons would have had no choice but to leave the mountains and settle in the plains to find alternative food sources. Over time, they would have stopped hunting and started feeding on snails, worms, and fruit. Despite this, they would have still had muscular hind legs with claws and powerful beaks. Wait a minute. That totally sounds like a kiwi, just several times bigger. Such dragons would definitely be welcome on farms, as the eggs they'd lay could be even more impressive than those of ostriches. Now, let's see what could happen to their aquatic relatives. Evolution would have equipped water dragons with fins instead of legs, or maybe their habitat would have made them completely limbless. At some stage of their transformation, these dragons would have gotten scales and sleek bodies to be more agile while moving underwater. Most likely, they would have existed on a diet of fish and small crustaceans and lost the ability to breathe fire together with their limbs. Instead, these dragons would have used poison to hunt and fight for life in the ocean. They would have looked exactly like the olive sea snake. If you ask me, that's anything but a mighty sea beast that used to terrify sailors for hundreds of years. So, could evolution have been more lenient with terrestrial dragons? It looks like they could have been the only privileged species to save face. Terrestrial dragons would have walked on 4 legs and been the largest of modern lizards. These animals would have lived in deserts where they could still spew fire and make use of their razor-sharp teeth. If dragons hadn't become the top predators, they would have surely been dangerous hunters. They would have fed on medium-sized mammals and perhaps even attacked people, just like modern Komodo dragons. It seems that in the imagination of our ancestors, dragons looked much more majestic than they do through a prism of science. But what if I tell you that despite all I've just said, you still have a chance to meet a real dragon? One of them lives in the tropics and has a more breathtaking appearance than any fictional monster. Its body is long and blue with 2 pairs of feet on each side, and its front feet resemble wings that branch out into finger-like serrata. The rear feet are a bit smaller, but have appendages connected to the digestive tract. Next to the dragon's mouth, there are tentacles that help it capture prey. This animal can wait for a victim for hours, lurking in water so skillfully that nobody would ever notice it. This fearsome beast, this blue sea dragon, is a tiny mollusk measuring no more than 40 millimeters. Would you like to run into it if it were hundreds of times larger?
Let's go.